Hello, welcome to the European Open Briefing for Monday, October the 16th. I'm Rafi Boyajan, currency analyst at XM.com, and we're going to be taking a look at what's happening in the currency markets today. So we are seeing a slightly firmer US dollar this morning, following some fairly hawkish remarks by Fed Chair Janet Yellen and other Fed policymakers over the weekend, although those gains are being capped by concerns about whether the current low inflation is transitory or not. The euro is down again today, extending last week's losses on rising political uncertainty in Europe. The pound is relatively steady, though, despite the fact that the Brexit negotiations seem to be at a deadlock. We've got an EU summit coming up this week where Brexit will be on at the top of the agenda, and Prime Minister May is also meeting EU officials in order to break that deadlock. In other currencies, the Aussie is slightly weaker this morning, though not too far from Friday's highs. We had more Chinese data this morning, further supporting the view that the Chinese economy is doing well. And in commodities, oil prices are up sharply this morning on fears that the US may impose fresh sanctions on Iran, as well as tensions in Iraq in some Kurdish areas. But let's first start with the US dollar. We can see a bit of a divergence with the dollar index and the dollar yen. The dollar index has been rising steadily since mid-October. We've got rising expectations of a December rate hike, and those expectations were reinforced yesterday by Fed Chair Janet Yellen, who said that the ongoing strength of the recovery will warrant gradual increases, and she still expects the inflation to pick up again later on, saying that the current soft readings will not persist. Earlier this morning, we had Boston Fed President Eric Rosengren saying that he expects 3 to 4 rate increases next year. That's slightly more hawkish than other Fed policymakers' views. We've had recently most have said that they expect just 3 rate hikes next year. Of course, on Friday, the US dollar did come under pressure from weaker than expected CPI numbers, although retail sales were fairly solid in the months of September. But we can see the dollar yen hasn't really received much of a boost from those rate hike expectations. It's actually been drifting the lower since for much of the month. It's currently trading at around 111.75. Moving on to the euro, we can see that the euro has been drifting lower. It's currently trading just under $1.18. We've got fresh uncertainty in the region. The main headlines this morning are out of Austria, where the Conservatives won the elections, although they didn't get a majority, and they will now most likely form a coalition with the far-right party, the Freedom Party. The Conservatives are being led by a 31-year-old. He's the youngest leader at the moment in the world, as far as we know, Sebastian Kurz. He won the elections on anti-immigration policies, which a lot of those views are being shared by the Freedom Party. So that's raised fresh uncertainty about the rise of populism in Europe. And in Spain, the Catalan crisis is showing no signs of receding. The Catalan leader, Carles Puigdemont, had a deadline today to declare, to clarify his position on whether or not he has declared independence from Spain. He didn't do so. He said he wants dialogue with the Spanish government. The Spanish government will now likely wait until Thursday whether to decide to impose direct rule on Catalonia. So that's still rambling on, although it's less of a threat to the euro than what's happening in Austria, which could has a has a bigger potential to influence EU policy. And in Germany, Merkel's party lost the regional elections, and that comes just as she's about to begin talks to form a coalition following similar elections in Germany, where Merkel's party failed to win a majority and therefore needs the support of at least two parties in order to form a government. And in UK, despite the uncertainty there over Brexit, the pound has been steadily recovering against the dollar. We can see it's trading not too far from Friday's 1.5 week highs of 1.3336. Last week's talks didn't go too well. We can see that volatility there when the fifth round of talks ended in deadlock, and today UK Prime Minister Theresa May is off to Brussels to talk with European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker as well, and they will be joined by the Brexit negotiators David Davis and Michel Barnier in an attempt to make some progress before the EU summit on Thursday and Friday, where the UK government is hoping to move the talks to the next phase, which will be to discuss post-Brexit trade relationship between the UK and the EU. So all of that will be very important and could potentially create further volatility for the pound. Also, it's going to be important week for UK data. We've got inflation numbers, unemployment, and retail sales figures as well, all released this week, and these come just ahead of the Bank of England's November policy meeting, where they are expected to raise rates. Let's have a look at the Australian dollar now. We can see that surge on Friday following Chinese trade data, which showed China imported a record amount of iron ore from Australia. So that obviously is positive for the Australian dollar, which hit a 2-week high of 0.7897. We had Chinese producer prices out earlier today, which rose to 6 months high of 6.9% in September, and pickup in producer prices in China is seen as something positive for the global economy, because it means that it indicates strong Chinese demand, and also we are seeing reflationary forces being back in play following that spout of deflation we saw last year. Consumer prices in China, though, they did moderate to 1.6%, though that didn't raise too many concerns. China will be in focus this week because the country's Communist Party on Wednesday starts the National Congress. The National Congress is held every 5 years, where they decide on economic and national policies. President Xi Jinping will likely be reappointed for a second 5-year term. And also we're going to have Chinese third quarter GDP numbers on Thursday. That's going to be very important as well, both for the regional Southeast Asian economies, and also for the Aussie, where Australia is heavily reliant on exports to China. And before we go, a quick look at oil prices. We can see US crude has risen back above $52 a barrel. There are several factors driving oil prices higher today. President Trump refused to recertify the Iran nuclear deal, which means Congress now may decide to impose fresh sanctions on Iran. If they do that, that could hit oil output, as Iran is a major exporter of oil. We are also seeing some conflict in Iraq in disputed Kurdish-held areas, where Iraqi forces have reportedly taken back control of some of those areas, and that could also cause potential disruption to supply. Also, we saw U.S. active oil rigs decline last week from 748 to 743, and we are seeing we're seeing the emergence of a flatlining trend in US output since late July, potentially signaling that US output is peaking. So all of that has been supportive for oil prices. The rest of the day is going to be fairly quiet, though. We're just going to have Eurozone trade data, but other than that, it's going to be a fairly quiet day in terms of data. That's it from me. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.